Guys, thank you so much for joining today. We were speaking to Dr. Andrew Wakefield, from The Pathological Optimist. And then we have another movie I don't know, he didn't produce, but he stars in, or he's about.
No, he's the director.
He's the director of this one. See, I haven't gotten to this one. I'm still in the first one. And The Pathological Optimist was great, guys. We did a whole segment on it. We'll have it clipped up and put out there. Jamie, bring it up full screen.
He was an orphan of conflict in Africa. He was smart and bright, and then we got him home and he crashed right in front of us.
Apparently, we're in the midst of a mumps outbreak.
Another?
Some people, some very important people, are saying our vaccine does not work.
You're gonna want to read this. We have a U.S. monopoly and a major share of the world market for MMR, and we own the only one that works.
Except that it does not.
We all sign contracts, gentlemen. Company interests above all others.
Make it work. They faked the data. It's all there. They cheated on every level. You said you're a lawyer,
Family law.
and you want to understand why.
Let me see it.
They couldn't get the result they wanted, so they re-engineered it. Not objective to improve the vaccine, but find something that gets them the result they want.
Fix it, gentlemen. 96%.
If the vaccine fails, we're all out of a job.
It has failed. You need to get what's going on here.
Is he in danger?
Internal memos were released. Quote, we may have to seek them out and destroy them where they live. Chilling knows. And yes, he is in danger.
What about Ishal?
Your son and every other son and daughter depends on whether or not you choose to live by their rules.
Incineration. Immediately.
Can we trust him to keep it together?
Were you aware?
Some tests included the weakened strain, I believe.
And did you approve?
I guess so.
Were you aware of the lab's failure to demonstrate efficacy of the mumps vaccine, a level required by the FDA?
No, to respond to the FDA's concern.
And leave a dangerous vaccine on the market?
Dangerous.
Objection.
Strongly recommended booster shots.
Of course you did.
What have they got? Like nothing is what they got.
Would you please identify this document for us? Please identify Exhibit 2 for me.
They've got stuff.
No, wait.
Exhibit 3, please.
This is a confidential document.
Objection. These were shredded.
It's a protocol.
They've got the sheets. They've got the evidence I was told they didn't have.
No one will ever believe them again.
Let's welcome on in Dr. Andrew Wakefield.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Great. Well, yeah, that was a clip from the new movie Protocol 7. So, Dr. Wakefield, why don't you give us a bit of the backstory, how you came to make this film, and how you transitioned from being a scientist to a film director, and what were the challenges involved?
Well, it started, having got involved in vaccine safety research, and that research having, been a threat to my career, eventually putting an end to my career as a physician and as a scientist. People had come to me over the years both from the industry, from the pharmaceutical industry, vaccine makers, and from federal agencies or regulatory agencies like the Department of Health in the UK and the CDC, FDA in America, and said, we've done a terrible thing, here is the evidence. And I became a sort of repository, if you like, for these extraordinary whistleblower stories. And what I would do in the early days is pass them on to, for example, False Claims Act lawyers who would deal with them according to their merits. And I thought, what, these would make amazing films. And I was doing screenwriting at the time. It seemed an obvious thing to turn this particular story into a screenplay about a young guy who'd come to me at an autism conference in Chicago many years before and told me this story. And so the original screenplay was written in 2012, and I wanted to let it play out. It was in court under the False Claims Act, and I wanted to allow it to play out. But in the end, there were so many motions to dismiss, motions for summary judgment and delays. My ultimate responsibility is to the public. My responsibility is not to the whistleblowers or to the industry or anything else, to the public. And this vaccine was continuing. They continued to use a vaccine that did not work. It was out of specification. What that meant was it didn't match up in any way to what was said on the product insert, the product information sheet, or the license application to the FDA for the vaccine. It did not work. It was not working. And that meant that at that stage, which was late 2009, when Merck became aware that it wasn't working, the vaccine should have been withdrawn. They should have stopped making it. There should have been a product recall. The CDC should have stopped buying it. And people who had been given this vaccine should be fully informed that they'd received a vaccine that likely did not work. None of that happened. They carried on selling it. The FDA conspired with the CDC to allow them to continue to make this vaccine and try and circumvent the problem, which led, and because they couldn't do that, that led to various tiers of fraud having been committed, ultimately against the public, against the children of this country and by proxy the world. And so I just said, that's it, to hell with it. This film has got to come out, and it's got to come out now. And so I sat down and I finished writing the screenplay with Terry Russell, who has written some little-known movies like Shrek and Pirates of the Caribbean. This is particularly the case for mumps, is that mumps is trivial in children. It's a trivial disease. They recover. Many children who've had mumps don't even know they've had it. Mumps in young adults in particular is not a trivial disease. Once you've gone past puberty, if you contract mumps, your risk of testicular inflammation and sterility or ovarian inflammation is much, much greater. And so if you have a vaccine that does not work or only works for a short length of time, and you become susceptible to mumps again after puberty, then what the vaccine has done is turn a trivial disease into a much more serious disease. So efficacy, protectiveness, and safety are intimately linked in the setting of mumps vaccine. And so this was what was going on. People were getting a vaccine that Merck and the FDA knew did not work, and they were turning a trivial disease into a more serious disease. That is why this is such an important case in many ways.
And yeah, if you can just update on the status of this case, people may want to follow.
Yes.
Absolutely. This is really important. That this case, Merck have not denied committing fraud. The fraud is obvious for all to see. The expert reports on behalf of the whistleblowers, which come from the ex-commissioner of the FDA, Dr. Kessler, amongst others, show unambiguously that Merck committed fraud. Merck haven't really contested that. What they said is, it's not material that we committed fraud, or we did any of these things, because the CDC went on buying the vaccine from us. Therefore, it couldn't have mattered. Well, the government came back, the CDC, and said, no, actually, that's not the case. There's only MMR, and we needed to protect children against measles and rubella. And so we had to. You held us hostage. We had to go on buying this vaccine from you, and the judge threw that argument out. And the judge also threw out the argument that, well, the FDA knew, but the CDC, the purchaser of the vaccine, didn't know. And they were the ones, therefore, who were defrauded. The judge didn't buy that either. The judge who came in after replacing the judge who'd been there for many years, and this comes back again, Craig, to your issue of corruption within the judiciary. I am quite certain the new judge was brought in to kill this case, because he said, put all of the issues of fraud to one side. It's not material. He ruled in favor of Merck. This is going to appeal in July, in early July, to the appellate court. It is likely that it will be overruled because the judge's decision was technically at fault, and certainly based on legal precedent. And if it does get overruled, then it will be set down for jury trial.
I think that's why this movie coming out is so important, right? Because these people won't do anything unless there's public pressure to move them. judges included, right? If it's about their election or their bad publicity or what's going on, if you expose some of their past cases. I remember in the movie, the first movie, The Pathological Optimist, that scene where your wife and you were in the kitchen and she was like, oh, all right, so this judge ruled against you, right, to kick it up. And you said, yeah, I think she didn't want to deal with a lot of the nonsense and the muddy of the waters, and she just wanted to punt. But then your wife says, well, what about her husband being a vaccine advocate of sorts? Do you think that had anything to do with the fact that she just punted? And that's why I think that this movie, Protocol 7, is so important. Where can people see this movie, since it's not like a big movie house movie?
Well, it is. It's just been picked up by Regal across America. So Regal Cinemas have picked it up. The Laemmle theaters in Southern California have picked it up. And we're pushing for more and more theaters, more times, and more the AMCs of this world and others. It's almost dangerously mainstream. It's not a place that I'm entirely familiar with. In Canada, it's been picked up by Cineplex in every province throughout Canada. So if people go to protocol7.movie, protocol numeral 7.movie, then they can see there is a drop-down menu of all of the theaters where it's scheduled to play at the moment. And we will add new theaters to that as and when they arise. The film, I should say, Craig, has won now 25 movie awards. Again, dangerously close to being mainstream. So
yeah, I wonder why. Like, why now? I mean, it is kind of we're talking about, like, I got deplatformed and demonetized for speaking about ivermectin, right? Like, when I was talking about ivermectin, I did my video a couple months before Dr. Corey did the Dark Horse, and I got spanked, shut down, silenced. But now people are talking about things that they couldn't talk about a couple years ago. Why do you think that is? I mean, you've probably thought about this yourself. Like you said, this is flying dangerously close to being mainstream. Why would they allow you to do this now when they went above and beyond to smear you, Dr. Wakefield, to make sure that your message never got out there?
Well, you've witnessed it personally. You've seen the censorship and the cancel culture that has followed in the wake of the failure of COVID policy and the failure of COVID vaccine, or the COVID shot. It's not even classified now after the Ninth Circuit Appeal Court ruling that it's not a vaccine at all. Never was, which is going to be very interesting to see that play out. But the world has changed, and the world has changed dramatically in the face of the COVID experience. People have no longer trust public health officials. Tony Fauci, the head honcho, is being eviscerated in front of congressional subcommittees for his lies, his deception, his double dealing, his fraud, and the fact that he supported financially Daszak and the Chinese in the production of this agent in the first place, SARS-CoV-2, that they withheld. They actively persecuted people like yourself who advocated for the use of what were life-saving drugs. And they did so in order to protect a culture of vaccine and vaccine only, or their own drug, the remdesivir. So the public are not stupid. The public have grown wise to this, and many, many people tragically have been injured as a consequence. So the film came at a very good time, because many people, including people for whom I have the greatest respect, like Peter McCullough, originally said, well, this applies to the COVID and COVID shot, but the childhood vaccine schedule is safe. And then when they investigated, as they should have done as scientists, they came to a very different conclusion. And so now Peter is very much on side that actually the industry has been behaving like this in the context of vaccine safety and efficacy for many, many years. This is how they operate, and it's now been exposed. You can only sustain lies for so long, and then suddenly the conspiracy theorists and others become those who've actually been bringing you the truth throughout.
Yeah. Conspiracy theorists are called truthers, Dr. Wakefield. That's what they call them now, because they speak the truth. And it is kind of crazy that you were pointing out the fact that this is their behavior. It just took COVID 1984 to expose the whole industry as a whole. Professor, please continue.
Okay, well, a number of thoughts we can discuss. I mean, well, one thing I think that they deliberately politicized this issue. I don't know if you would agree with me. They made it into a left versus right, and a lot of the people on the left were prone, oddly, to defend the pharmaceutical companies. That those who were promoting this anti-vax were Trumpers. I don't know if you have any comments on that strange political dynamic, because that's something we address on this show. And then the second question would be, I mean, what do you see as some of the solutions in the long term, or political solutions? I mean, on one hand, I think we have a growing movement for natural health solutions. People are weary of over medication, which could be a very positive phenomenon. A traditional leftist approach would be to try and break up the big pharmaceutical giants, or even nationalize it. So what would be your thoughts on some of the solutions?
Well, I think that you're absolutely right. They've tried very much to politicize this, and quite what their motives behind doing that were. These things tend to backfire, and when they backfire, the pendulum swings quite a long way the other way. And so the revelation of their malfeasance has come at a critical time for the Democrats and the Republicans, because if that is the case, that the Republicans were in favor of bodily autonomy and freedom to decide whether you masked or vaccinated, and the Democrats were in favor of the pharmaceutical companies, which, as you say, is rather unusual, then it's failed very, very badly, and it failed at a critical time for the Democrats. Irrespective of my own view on politics, I'm not a fan of big government at all. I've witnessed in autism, for example, and coming to America, I've witnessed this even more, is that big governments create big problems, big expensive problems like autism, for which there is no solution. And it's left to the people, the communities, to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and put it right, to create community centers for adults with autism where none exist at a federal level, to take on scientific studies, to fund them themselves in order to get answers for their children. So it's small communities actually defining, shaping their future, rather than big government having any answers, and yet pushing extremely hard for mandatory vaccination across the board, and creating, in my view, a much greater problem. So I'm not a fan of big government in any shape, manner, or form. But that's an issue for another day. But
we got to get you back on the show to talk about your politics. There's so many things I want to ask you about China and their role with this whole situation. But what are your thoughts on? I mean, and thank you. It sounds like you're a libertarian of sorts.
Yeah, no. When I was in England, we didn't have libertarians in England. When I came to America, I thought they were people who liked to party, but I discovered. Yes, I think that many of the libertarian principles are ones which kind of define my thinking as well.
Well, what are your thoughts? And we have about 2 minutes and 47 seconds left. What are your thoughts, though? There's a question I asked the libertarian candidate for president if he would ban gain-of-function testing on day one. Now, he gave me a libertarian answer like, well, I would kick it to the private sector. I would never, ever ban anything as the government. But what are your thoughts on gain-of-function testing across the board? Should they ban it?
Yes, absolutely. It should be banned. It shouldn't be regulated, or it should be stopped completely. Because what we're doing, when you dabble with nature, then you pay an enormous price. This is like Jurassic Park. Crichton was a genius. Crichton described the first gain of function before there was even a name for gain of function. But that's what you do. You create monsters over which you have no control, zero control. Obvious for some years, but nature exacts a very, very heavy price. So when you change the ecosystem by creating in the laboratory agents which are extraordinarily dangerous beyond your wildest dreams, because of the impact they have not just on people in a disease sense, but in the way people think, in the way governments behave, in the way that economies collapse under the weight of government diktat, That is the great danger, the extended, the sort of extrapolation of the original intent to something far, far beyond man's control.
We got 50 seconds left. Give us your final thoughts on the bird flu that they're pushing now, and we'll get you back on to talk more things. I stole a lot of the professor's questions. 45 seconds, bird flu. Go ahead.
I think my message to people is to trust their natural immunity. What we've learned more than anything is that very few people are susceptible in the way that we were told they were. We need to trust in God-given, whatever it is, natural immunity that has evolved over millions of years, and not in something that's shot into your arm that we know for the vast majority of flu vaccines, for example, are wholly ineffective.
Natural immunity. Oh, Dr. Wakefield, you sound like a Nazi, for crying out loud, is what they would scream. Ladies, that's it for LOL, where the left critiques itself and laughed out loud to keep itself from crying. I am your host, Craig Pasta Jardula, along with Jeremy Kuzmarov and the great Dr. Andrew Wakefield.